When I got into a car accident, my parents refused to come to the hospital to sign the surgery consent. Dad texted, "Can't this wait? We're busy." So I called Grandpa instead. 3 weeks later, I served them eviction papers and watched their lives burn. All right, Reddit. I got into a serious car accident, and my parents didn't even bother showing up for the surgery consent. They said they were having dinner with my sister. Luckily, my grandpa and my best friend were by my side. 3 weeks after I recovered, I legally kicked them out of my house. But it didn't end there. Here's what went down. I, 34 male, was living the dream in downtown Chicago. Senior financial analyst at a major investment firm, pulling in $180,000 a year. Corner office overlooking Lake Michigan. Not bad for a kid who grew up dodging creditors in Cicero. It was a Friday in February. I'd just wrapped up a client meeting in the Loop and was driving my BMW 5 Series North on Lakeshore Drive, thinking about hitting up my buddy Scott for some drinks and Bulls tickets. That's when some dipshit in a semi decided to play bumper cars on black ice. I saw it coming in slow motion, the truck jackknifing across 3 lanes, sliding sideways like a 40-ton hockey puck straight toward my car. I yanked the wheel hard right, but physics is a cruel mistress. The semi clipped my rear quarter panel and sent me spinning into the concrete median at about 50 miles per hour. The impact sounded like God himself crushing a can. My BMW crumpled like aluminum foil. The airbag deployed so hard it felt like getting punched by Mike Tyson, and my head whipped sideways into the driver's side window hard enough to spider the glass. Blood was everywhere, streaming down my face, pooling in my lap, dripping onto the floor mats I'd just had detailed. My left arm was bent at an angle that definitely wasn't factory spec, and every breath felt like someone was stabbing me in the ribs with an ice pick. I was barely conscious. The paramedics had to use the jaws of life to extract me from what used to be my car. 15 minutes of grinding metal and shouting while I drifted in and out of consciousness. The ride to Northwestern Memorial was a blur of sirens and some EMT asking me questions like, "Do you know what year it is?" And, "Can you wiggle your toes?" Dr. Morales, a trauma surgeon with steady hands and zero bedside manner, delivered the verdict. Severe concussion, dislocated shoulder, and 3 cracked ribs. We need to operate immediately to repair the shoulder. Then came the kicker. Due to the severity of your head trauma, you're not legally competent to consent to surgery. We need your next of kin to sign off. My heart sank. I knew what that meant. Sarah, the nurse assigned to my bay, helped me unlock my phone with shaking fingers. The first call to mom and dad went straight to voicemail. Second call, same thing. Sarah sent a text for me. Was in bad car accident. At Northwestern Memorial. Need you here as soon as possible. The response came back in under 2 minutes. At Celeste's apartment for family dinner. Can this wait until tomorrow? Can this wait? I'm literally bleeding internally, and they want to know if life-saving surgery can wait because they're eating lasagna with my sister. Sarah's face went pale reading the message. She sent another text. Need emergency surgery. The hospital requires family consent. This can't wait. 5 minutes of silence. Heart monitor beeping. The smell of disinfectant mixing with my own blood. Me wondering if I was about to die because my parents couldn't be bothered to leave Celeste's dinner table. Then my phone buzzed. We're busy right now. Call your grandfather if it's really that urgent. The fury that hit me was white hot. My blood pressure spiked so hard, the monitor started alarming, and then everything went black. When I woke up 3 hours later, I was in the ICU with more machines attached to me than a NASA launch pad. My grandfather Gerald was sitting beside me, still wearing his work clothes from the auto shop. Surgery went fine, Dean, he said. Shoulder's good as new, ribs will heal. You're gonna be all right. Grandpa Gerald barely left my side for the next 2 days, until they moved me to a regular room. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube. He handed me some ice chips and waited. They didn't come, I finally croaked. Grandpa Gerald looked out the window at the Chicago skyline for a long moment. When he turned back to me, his voice was quiet but firm. Son, not everyone who shares your blood deserves to be called family. And that's when it hit me. 34 years of being the responsible one, the backup plan, and when I was literally dying, they chose Celeste's freaking dinner. The rage I felt wasn't just about the accident. It was about every birthday they missed because Celeste had a crisis. Every holiday where I got them gifts and got a generic thanks, while Celeste got tears of joy. Every time I bailed them out financially while listening to lectures about how I didn't understand family. I finally understood family perfectly, and I was done being theirs. Let me paint you a picture of how screwed up the Donovan family dynamic really was. because that hospital text didn't happen in a vacuum. Growing up in Cicero, things were actually normal until I was 8 and Celeste was 6. We had typical sibling stuff, fighting over the TV remote, competing for the last piece of pizza, standard working-class Irish family bullshit. Then Celeste got bacterial meningitis. I still remember that night. She was burning up with fever, hallucinating, and my parents completely lost their shit. Dad was pacing the kitchen like a caged animal, while Mom cried hysterically into the phone with 911. They rushed her to the ER while I stayed with the neighbors, listening to Mrs. O'Brien tell me to pray for your sister. For 3 weeks, Celeste was touch and go. My parents basically moved into that hospital room. Mom slept in a chair, Dad burned through vacation days, and I learned how to make myself invisible. 8 years old, and I was getting myself ready for school, doing homework alone, eating cereal for dinner, while my parents maintained their vigil at St. Mary's. When neighbors asked how I was doing, I'd say fine, because that's what good boys were supposed to say. Celeste recovered, but the family never did. Suddenly, she became this fragile princess who needed constant protection. Stubbed her toe? Mom would panic like it was a relapse? Got a B+ on a test? Don't push her, she's still recovering. And Celeste? Smart little manipulator figured out real quick that playing the victim card was her golden ticket to Easy Street. Didn't want to do chores? My head hurts from the medication. Wanted a new toy. I get tired so easily now. Wanted to skip family obligations? Crowds make me dizzy. Meanwhile, I'm pulling straight A's, doing chores without being asked, never complaining about anything because God forbid I add stress to their lives, while they're still dealing with Celeste's recovery. By high school, Celeste had weaponized her medical history into a full-time gig. She'd roll her eyes and sigh dramatically whenever asked to do literally anything, then look at Mom with these big doe eyes and say, "I'm just so tired today." Mom would immediately jump in with, "Of course, honey, you rest." I once suggested Celeste help with yard work since she was 16 and perfectly healthy. The look she gave me could have curdled milk. "Some of us," she said with that snippy tone, "have actual health issues to deal with. Not everyone can be naturally lucky like you." Dad immediately backed her up. "Dean, you know better than to push your sister. She's been through enough." That became the family motto. Celeste's been through enough. Enough to excuse her from every responsibility, every expectation, every basic requirement of being a functioning human being. The really twisted part? I started wishing I'd been the one who got sick. At least then maybe they'd care about me the way they obsessed over her. By college, the roles were set in concrete. Celeste was the precious flower who needed constant protection. I was the reliable workhorse who didn't need basic human consideration. The pattern was so ingrained that even when I was bleeding out in a hospital bed, they still prioritized her dinner plans over my life-threatening injuries. Some wishes really do come true. I just wish I'd learned 26 years earlier that their love was never worth earning. 2008 hit the Donovan family like a freight train carrying financial ruin. Dad's small trucking company went belly up during the recession, not just struggling, but completely obliterated. $800,000 in debt, creditors calling every hour, foreclosure notice taped to our front door like a scarlet letter. I'll never forget walking into the kitchen and seeing Dad sitting at the table with his head in his hands, crying like a broken man. The foreclosure papers were spread out in front of him, and Mom was rubbing his shoulders while tears streamed down her face. "We're gonna lose everything," he sobbed. "I failed you all." At 18, looking at my family's financial destruction, I made a decision that would define the next decade of my life. I'd be the one to fix it. I landed a full scholarship to University of Illinois Chicago and immediately picked up 3 jobs. Starbucks at 5 a.m., campus library until 3 p.m., tutoring rich North Shore kids on weekends. 45 hours a week while maintaining a 3.9 GPA, because failure meant my family would be living in their car. And Celeste? She enrolled at a community college and continued her career as a professional victim. Meanwhile, I'm grinding myself into dust, working 3 jobs and going to school full-time, sending home $800 a month to keep the lights on. When relatives asked why Celeste wasn't working, Mom would get defensive. She's focusing on her education. Not everyone can handle as much as Dean. 4 years later, I graduated summa cum laude with a finance degree and landed a position at JP Morgan Chase for $95,000. Most of my classmates were celebrating. Me? I was too busy calculating how. By 26, I'd saved enough to buy a condo in River North. Nice place, great view of the lake. Finally something that was mine. Didn't even tell the family about it because I knew what would happen. Sure enough, that Thanksgiving, Mom cornered me in the kitchen with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. "Dean," she said, We can't keep renting this place in Cicero. The neighborhood's getting rough, and your father's truck got broken into twice last month. We need somewhere safe. The guilt trip was masterful. So what did responsible, dependable Dean do? Dropped $400,000 of my savings on a house in Mount Prospect. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, nice suburban neighborhood where the biggest crime was someone not picking up their dog shit. Handed over the keys on Christmas morning and got a tearful hug from Mom. "You're such a good son," she sobbed. "The best son any mother could ask for." That warm feeling lasted exactly 6 weeks. Then came the follow-up call. "Dean, this house is really nice, but it feels empty with just your father and me rattling around. Could you maybe look into getting something bigger so Celeste can move in with us? She's having trouble with her roommate situation." Celeste was 25, had a job at a marketing firm, perfectly capable of handling her own living arrangements. But apparently adulting was too stressful for someone with her delicate constitution. "She can find her own place," I said. "She's got a job and everything." Mom's voice immediately shifted to that martyred tone. "Dean, when did you become so cold? Celeste makes half what you do, and she's still not at full strength. Family helps family." "Right." Like when I was bleeding out in a hospital and my family chose dinner over emergency surgery. But I wasn't ready for that fight yet. So I let them move Celeste into the house I'd bought with my own sweat and sacrifice, watching my spoiled sister treat my gift like it was her birthright. For the next 6 years, I played the role of family ATM while they played house in Mount Prospect. The financial damage was staggering. $400,000 for the house, $2,400 a month for groceries and utilities, emergency car repairs, medical bills, Celeste's remaining college expenses. All handed over because I wanted to feel loved. I was the provider, they were a happy family, and everyone pretended that was normal. Until the day I ended up broken and bleeding, and their true priorities finally showed. Recovery from that crash was a bitch. 6 weeks of physical therapy, months of dealing with insurance vultures, and psychological trauma that made me jump every time I heard squealing brakes. But 2 good things came out of that nightmare. I met Ellie, and I rediscovered what real friendship looked like. Scott Alvarez had been my best friend since freshman year at UIC. Guy was built like a linebacker but had the heart of a golden retriever and the mouth of a sailor. While I was the uptight finance major stressing about every test, Scott was the laid-back mechanical engineering student who somehow aced everything while barely cracking a book. When I called him from the hospital, his response was classic Scott. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Do you need anything? Snacks? Magazines? A hitman for whoever did this to you?" That's Scott for you. He showed up with a bag of my favorite beef jerky, the latest Sports Illustrated, and a thermos of coffee. Didn't ask what happened to my parents. Didn't lecture me about family. Just parked his ass in that uncomfortable hospital chair and kept me company. "You know what this reminds me of?" he said during one of my rants about family loyalty. "That time in college when you lent Brad your car and he brought it back with 3 dents and an empty gas tank? Remember what you did?" I never lent him anything again. Exactly. Scott became my reality check during those weeks when every Donovan relative was calling to guilt trip me about abandoning family. He'd listen to me vent about the latest phone call, then respond with something like, "So your Aunt Deborah thinks you're an asshole for not being a doormat anymore? The same Aunt Deborah who forgot your birthday 3 years running but remembered to ask you for a loan?" Yeah, her opinion's really valuable. Ellie was different but equally important. As my physical therapist, she saw me at my most vulnerable, struggling to lift my arm, wincing through exercises, dealing with panic attacks whenever someone mentioned car accidents. But she never treated me like a patient. She treated me like a person. "You're not broken," she'd say when I got frustrated with my slow progress. "You're healing. There's a difference." Ellie was a straight shooter from Bridgeport, daughter of a Chicago cop and a CPS teacher. She'd seen enough family dysfunction in her line of work to recognize toxic patterns immediately. "Your shoulder's going to be fine," she told me during one session. "But this guilt you're carrying? That's going to take longer to heal if you don't address it." She never pushed, just listened and offered perspective when I asked for it. When I told her about the years of being the family ATM, she nodded like she'd heard the story 100 times. Scott and Ellie became my anchor during the shitstorm that followed. When the Donovan family drama machine went into overdrive, they were the ones who reminded me that normal families don't treat love like a transaction. "You know what normal looks like?" Scott asked one night over drinks. "My mom would have broken speed limits to get to that hospital. Hell, she would have performed the surgery herself if she had to." That's when it finally clicked. Real love shows up. Real love doesn't make excuses. Scott and Ellie showed me that every day, just by being there. 3 weeks after getting discharged, I was done playing games. Time to lawyer up and show the Donovan family what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I walked into the office of Janet Morrison, one of Chicago's most feared family law attorneys. The woman had a reputation for eating opposing counsel for breakfast and billing by the hour for the privilege. After listening to my story, she leaned back in her chair and smiled like a shark smelling blood. "Mr. Donovan," she said, "you have an ironclad case for property recovery. The house is in your name. You can prove financial ownership, and you have documentation of their refusal to provide emergency assistance when you needed it most. This isn't just legal, it's justified. How long do I have to give them? 30 days is standard. However, since you're reclaiming the property for your own occupancy as the owner, Illinois law allows for a 72-hour notice in specific circumstances. Given their behavior and your intent to use the property yourself, we can go with the accelerated timeline. 72 hours. Christmas morning in reverse. I took a deep breath and made the decision that would nuke the family dynamic from orbit. Draw up the papers. The eviction notice was delivered by a sheriff's deputy on a Tuesday morning. Clean, simple, devastating. Notice to quit. You are hereby required to quit and surrender possession of the above-described premises to the owner. You have 72 hours to vacate. The phone calls started within an hour. First was Dad, voice shaking with rage. "Dean, what the hell is this? You can't just throw us out of our home." Our home. The house I'd bought with my own money and gifted to them out of misplaced loyalty. "It's my house, Dad. I'm reclaiming my property. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? What exactly have you done for me? Because when I was bleeding out in a hospital, you chose Celeste's dinner party." Silence. Then the classic Donovan pivot. That was different. We didn't know how serious it was. "I told you I needed emergency surgery. Well, you seem fine now." Click. First bridge burned. Mom called 20 minutes later. Waterworks at full blast. "Dean, please don't do this. We're your parents. We love you." Love doesn't abandon people in hospitals, Mom. "Don't be dramatic. It's not like you can't handle things yourself." That's what I'm doing. You've got 60 hours left. Celeste called last, and her approach was pure entitled princess. You're acting like a spoiled child who didn't get his way. Mom and Dad are senior citizens. You can't just make them homeless. Watch me. I'll fight this. I'll call lawyers. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. "Go ahead," I said. "I've got documentation of everything. Good luck explaining Dad's hospital text to a jury." The next 48 hours were a masterclass in family dysfunction. My phone rang nonstop with relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all suddenly concerned about family values and Christian forgiveness. The star of the show was Aunt Deborah, Dad's sister, who called screaming about what a heartless monster I'd become. "You're throwing elderly people out on the street," she shrieked. "What would Jesus think?" "Jesus would probably wonder why they chose dinner over their son's emergency surgery," I replied. "But hey, if you're so concerned about their housing situation, they can move in with you." Sudden silence. Funny how family solidarity evaporates when it involves actual sacrifice. "Well, I don't have room," she backtracked. "Then shut the fuck up." I hung up and blocked her number. As the 72-hour deadline approached, I half expected them to comply quietly. The Donovan family had always been about maintaining appearances, avoiding confrontation, keeping dirty laundry private. I should have known better. They were about to show me just how ugly things could get when their meal ticket finally fought back. Thursday night around 9 p.m., I was in my River North condo nursing a drink and reading when my doorman called up. "Mr. Donovan, there are 3 people here claiming to be your family. They're persistent about wanting to come up." I looked out my window and saw Dad's beat-up Ford parked in the loading zone, hazards blinking. Through the lobby glass, I could see all 3 of them, Mom clutching her purse like a lifeline, Dad puffing up his chest, and Celeste with her arms crossed, wearing that entitled smirk I'd grown to hate. "Send them up," I told the doorman. "Might as well get this over with." When I opened the door, the rage was immediate and palpable. Dad pushed past me into the apartment like he owned the place, with Mom and Celeste following close behind. The entitlement was stunning. Not even a hello, just storming into my home like they had every right to be there. "Dean Michael Donovan," Dad started, using my full name like I was 12 years old again. "This nonsense stops right now. You're going to call off this eviction, and we're going to forget this whole thing ever happened." "Nope," I said, closing the door behind them. "I'm not." Celeste immediately lunged. "This is so typical of you. Everything always has to be about you, doesn't it? Poor Dean didn't get enough attention, so now he's throwing a tantrum. The contempt in her voice was pure poison. 26 years of resentment boiling over in my own living room. You're right, I said, walking to my bar cart and pouring another drink. It is about me. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making decisions based on what I want instead of what you all need from me. Mom tried the waterworks approach. Dean, we raised you better than this. Family doesn't abandon family. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. You abandoned me first, I said, taking a sip. When I was bleeding in a hospital bed and you chose dinner over emergency surgery. Dad's face turned red. We explained that? We didn't know how serious it was. I told you I needed surgery. What part of that wasn't clear? You seem fine now, Celeste interjected with an eye roll. You're being dramatic. That's when something inside me snapped. Time for some shock therapy. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. You want to know what dramatic looks like? Here's a list of every penny I've sent this family over the past decade. Want me to read it out loud? $400,000 for the house. $115,200 for groceries and utilities over 4 years. Emergency car repairs. Medical bills. Celeste's remaining college expenses. Another $47,000. Grand total, $562,200. The number hung in the air like a bomb. Over $500,000, I continued. And when I needed you for one night when I was literally dying, you couldn't be bothered to drive 20 minutes to the hospital. We paid you back, Mom protested. With what? Love? Support? Basic human decency? Because I haven't seen evidence of any of those. Celeste's mask finally slipped completely. Oh, spare us the martyr act, Dean. You gave us that money because you wanted to feel important. You wanted to be the big shot brother who could solve everyone's problems. Don't act like you didn't get anything out of it. There it was. The truth they'd all been thinking but never had the balls to say. You're right, I said. I did want to feel important. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel like family. Took me 34 years to realize that was never going to happen. Dad tried one last power play. If you go through with this eviction, you're dead to us. Dead. You'll never be welcome in this family again. I started laughing. Actually laughing, which clearly wasn't the reaction they expected. Dead to you? I said. I've been dead to you for years. That's when Celeste made her biggest mistake. She stepped forward, pointing her finger at my chest. You're going to regret this, Dean. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I'll destroy your reputation, your career, everything. When I'm done with you, you'll be begging us to take you back. I walked to the door and opened it wide. You have 18 hours left to vacate my property. If you're not out by Saturday at noon, the sheriff will be there to assist you. Good luck finding somewhere that accepts tenants with no money down and a history of thinking other people's generosity is their birthright. They filed out in stunned silence, Celeste shooting me a look of pure hatred as she passed. Dad tried to slam my door, but it had one of those slow close mechanisms that made his dramatic exit look ridiculous. As I watched them walk to the elevator, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace with my decision. The war was about to begin, and I was finally ready to fight. Saturday at noon, I drove to Mount Prospect with Scott riding shotgun and a smug smile on my face. The sheriff's deputy was already there, along with a locksmith and a small moving truck I'd hired to haul their shit to the curb. The Donovan family had made their choice. They were going to make this as difficult and dramatic as possible. They were still there, of course, because following simple legal instructions was apparently beyond their capabilities. Dad was on the front lawn yelling at the deputy about illegal eviction and tenant rights, while Mom sat on the porch steps crying into a tissue. Celeste was on her phone, probably calling everyone in Chicago to paint herself as the victim of her cruel brother's tyranny. Showtime, Scott said, cracking his knuckles. You want me to handle the heavy lifting? Nah, I want to savor this. The deputy walked over as I got out of the car. Mr. Donovan, we're ready to proceed with the eviction. Just need you to confirm you want to move forward. Absolutely. Dean! Dad shouted, storming over with that red-faced rage I remembered from childhood. You can't do this. We're your parents. Actually, he can, Deputy Williams said calmly. This is his property, and you've been legally notified. You have 20 minutes to gather personal belongings. Everything else stays. Celeste came screeching across the lawn like a banshee. This is harassment. Abuse. I'm calling the news. Ma'am, the deputy said, you can call whoever you want, but from the street. You're trespassing on private property. The next 20 minutes were pure chaos. Mom was sobbing while throwing random items into garbage bags. Dad was muttering about lawyers and lawsuits. Celeste was live streaming the whole thing on Instagram, narrating like she was documenting war crimes. "This is my brother, Dean Donovan," she said to her phone camera, making sure to get my license plate in the shot. "He's throwing his elderly parents out of their home because he's a sociopathic narcissist." Scott nudged me. "You getting this?" Every word. As they loaded their belongings into their Ford, Dad made one last attempt at a guilt trip. "You're destroying this family, Dean. When we're living in some shelter because of you, I hope you can sleep at night." "Dad," I said, "you've got jobs, you've got credit, you've got Aunt Deborah who's so concerned about your welfare. Figure it out like every other adult." Celeste tried to take some of the furniture, the dining room set, the leather couch, the 65-inch TV, claiming they were family heirlooms. "Ma'am," Deputy Williams said, "everything in this house was purchased by Mr. Donovan and belongs to him. You can take personal clothing and items, nothing else." The look of absolute fury on her face was priceless. As they drove away, Celeste rolled down her window and screamed, "I'm going to destroy you, Dean! Everyone's going to know what a monster you are!" "Looking forward to it," I called back. Scott was grinning. "Dude, that was beautiful. She literally threatened to destroy your reputation in front of a cop and on video." "I know. The best part is, she thinks she's got some master plan to ruin me. Has no idea I've been documenting everything." The house was mine again. Clean slate, fresh start, and the most expensive lesson in family dynamics ever purchased. That night, I changed all the locks, set up a security system, and poured myself a drink. The next morning, I put the house on the rental market for $3,200 a month. It was rented within a week to a nice young couple who paid first and last month up front. No drama. Meanwhile, true to her word, Celeste launched her social media assault. Facebook posts about her abusive brother, Instagram stories about family trauma, TikTok videos crying about being homeless because of greed. The whole victim narrative playbook. She had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks later, Celeste went full nuclear. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked on the door, face pale as a ghost. "Mr. Donovan, you need to see this. There's a Facebook post about you that's going viral." The link led to a group called Chicago Family Drama, apparently where people air their dirty laundry for internet strangers. Celeste had posted a masterpiece of manipulation that would have made Stalin proud. 4 photos. Mom and Dad looking devastated while packing boxes. A shot of the moving truck in front of their house. Mom crying on the front steps like her world had ended. And my professional headshot from the company website, because nothing says villain like a guy in a business suit. The caption was pure poison. "This is Dean Donovan, a financial analyst in downtown Chicago. He just evicted his elderly parents from their home of 2 years, a house they've been living in while helping him through his recovery. When they couldn't drop everything to visit him in the hospital after a minor car accident, he decided to punish them by making them homeless. Money can't buy a conscience." Within 6 hours, it had 3,000 shares. The comments were a freaking bloodbath. What kind of monster does this to his own parents? Someone should find out where this psychopath works. Hope karma gets him good. My phone started buzzing with notifications. Friend requests from strangers. Messages calling me everything from a sociopath to a waste of oxygen. Someone had found my LinkedIn and was posting the screenshot there. Another genius discovered my company's website and started leaving 1-star reviews mentioning my family abuse. By the end of the day, the post had 8,000 shares and over 2,000 comments. Local Chicago Facebook groups were sharing it. The next morning, my boss called me into his office. Mr. Patterson looked like he'd rather be getting a root canal. "Dean, we've received over 200 calls and emails about a social media post. Clients are asking questions. Some are threatening to pull their accounts if we keep you on staff." My stomach dropped. "Are you firing me?" "Not firing, but I need you to take a leave of absence. Paid, of course, but until this blows over." That afternoon, I was back in Janet Morrison's office with a thick folder of evidence. "Mr. Donovan," Morrison said after reviewing everything, "this is textbook defamation. She made false statements of fact that damaged your reputation and cost you income. We have a slam dunk case." Morrison smiled. "This is going to be fun." 6 months later, I was sitting in Cook County Circuit Court watching Celeste's lies unravel in real time. The courtroom was packed. Donovan family members in the back rows, a few reporters who'd caught wind of the case, and Scott in the front row filming everything on his phone for posterity. Janet Morrison had assembled a case that was pure legal warfare. Every screenshot documented and time-stamped. Expert witnesses on social media damage. Professional reputation analysts. And the crown jewel, Dad's hospital text message blown up on a poster board for the entire courtroom to see. Day 1. Morrison opened with the nuclear option. She read Dad's text aloud to the jury. Can't this wait? We're busy right now. If it's urgent, call your grandfather. You could hear a pin drop. Several jurors actually looked disgusted. Celeste's lawyer tried to object, but the judge shut him down. This text message was sent while my client was unconscious in the ICU, requiring emergency surgery, Morrison continued. The defendants chose dinner over a medical emergency, then launched a coordinated harassment campaign when my client exercised his legal right to reclaim his own property. Celeste's attorney tried to paint me as the vindictive rich boy punishing his poor family. His opening statement was pathetic. Dean Donovan used his wealth as a weapon against the very people who raised him and loved him. Day 2. The social media experts testified. Dr. Martinez, who specialized in online reputation damage, walked the jury through every share, every comment, every piece of harassment that Celeste's post had generated. The defendant's post was shared over 8,000 times and generated more than 2,000 negative comments, she testified. The hashtag Dean Donovan is a monster was used over 500 times. This represents severe and lasting damage to the plaintiff's professional reputation. Then came my boss, Mr. Patterson, who testified about the impact on my career. We received hundreds of calls and emails demanding Mr. Donovan's termination. Several major clients threatened to end their relationships with our firm. We had no choice but to place him on administrative leave. Day 3. Celeste finally took the stand, and it was a bloodbath. Morrison tore her apart like a lion with a gazelle. Ms. Donovan, did you verify any of the claims in your Facebook post before publishing them? No, but I was emotional. Did you mention that your brother had purchased the house with his own money? Well, no, but did you mention that he had financially supported your family for over a decade? That's not relevant. When my parents tried to testify in Celeste's defense, Morrison destroyed them too. The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes. When they returned, the foreman read the verdict with zero emotion. In the matter of Donovan versus Donovan, we find for the plaintiff and award damages in the amount of $98,000. Celeste collapsed in her chair like someone had shot her. Her boyfriend, who'd been sitting in the back, got up and walked out without a word. Mom started sobbing. Dad stared at the ceiling like he was praying for divine intervention. As the judge dismissed the jury, Celeste turned to look at me with pure hatred in her eyes. I smiled and gave her a little wave. Within a week, Celeste's design business was finished. Clients started canceling contracts when they realized she was facing a six-figure judgment. Her boyfriend moved out and blocked her on everything. Mom and Dad, who'd been renting a shitty apartment in Cicero, had to move in with Aunt Deborah. That lasted exactly 2 weeks before Deborah kicked them out for being ungrateful house guests who brought drama into her home. The rental income from the Mount Prospect house kept flowing into my bank account, $3,200 a month that represented the Donovan family's complete failure to understand consequences. Ellie and I got married that spring. Small ceremony, just the people who actually mattered. Scott was my best man and gave a speech about loyalty that made half the guests cry. Grandpa Gerald walked Ellie down the aisle and whispered to me at the altar, "This one's a keeper." The Donovan family wasn't invited. They found out about the wedding through Facebook, which seemed appropriate. 6 months after the trial, I got a text from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy. We lost everything because of you." I deleted the text and blocked the number. Some people never learn, and that's not my problem anymore. The house is still generating income. Celeste's still posting victim content on social media, but now she has to disclose that she lost a defamation lawsuit for lying about family members. Cost her nearly $100,000 in damages and legal fees. And me? I sleep like a baby every night, knowing I finally learned the difference between being a good son and being a punching bag. The rental income goes straight into my daughter's college fund now. Ellie's pregnant, and we're already planning to teach our kids something the Donovan family never learned. Love isn't transactional, loyalty isn't one-sided, and family doesn't abandon family. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. But legal revenge with a six-figure payout? That's not bad either.